"Good heavens," cried Catherine, quite frightened. "Then pray let us turn back. They will certainly meet with an accident if we go on. Do let us turn back, Mr. Thorpe. Stop and speak to my brother and tell him how very unsafe it is." "Unsafe, oh Lord, what is there in that? They will only get a roll if it does break down, and there is plenty of dirt, it will be excellent falling. Oh, curse it, the carriage is safe enough if a man knows how to drive it. A thing of that sort in good hands will last above 20 years after it is fairly worn out. Lord bless you, I would undertake for £5 to drive it to York and back again without losing a nail." Catherine listened with astonishment. She knew not how to reconcile two such very different accounts of the same thing, for she had not been brought up to understand the propensities of a rattle, nor to know to how many idle assertions and impudent falsehoods the excess of vanity will lead. Her own family were plain, matter-of-fact people who seldom aimed at wit of any kind, her father at the utmost, being contented with a pun, and her mother with a proverb. They were not in the habit therefore of telling lies to increase their importance, or of asserting at one moment what they would contradict the next. She reflected on the affair for some time in much perplexity, and was more than once on the point of requesting from Mr. Thorpe a clearer insight into his real opinion on the subject, but she checked herself, because it appeared to her that he did not excel in giving those clearer insights, in making those things plain which he had before made ambiguous, and joining to this the consideration that he would not really suffer his sister and his friend to be exposed to a danger from which he might easily preserve them, she concluded at last that he must know the carriage to be in fact perfectly safe, and therefore would alarm herself no longer. By him the whole matter seemed entirely forgotten, and all the rest of his conversation, or rather talk, began and ended with himself and his own concerns. He told her of horses which he had bought for a trifle and sold for incredible sums, of racing matches in which his judgment had infallibly foretold the winner, of shooting parties in which he had killed more birds, though without having one good shot, than all his companions together, and described to her some famous day's sport with the foxhounds, in which his foresight and skill in directing the dogs had repaired the mistakes of the most experienced huntsman, and in which the boldness of his riding, though it had never endangered his own life for a moment, had been constantly leading others into difficulties, which he calmly concluded had broken the necks of many. Little as Catherine was in the habit of judging for herself, and unfixed as were her general notions of what men ought to be, she could not entirely repress a doubt, while she bore with the effusions of his endless conceit, of his being altogether completely agreeable. It was a bold surmise, for he was Isabella's brother, and she had been assured by James that his manners would recommend him to all her sex. But in spite of this, the extreme weariness of his company, which crept over her before they had been out an hour, and which continued unceasingly to increase till they stopped in Pulteney Street again, induced her in some small degree to resist such high authority, and to distrust his powers of giving universal pleasure. When they arrived at Mrs. Allen's door, the astonishment of Isabella was hardly to be expressed, on finding that it was too late in the day for them to attend her friend into the house. Past 3 o'clock. It was inconceivable, incredible, impossible, and she would neither believe her own watch nor her brother's, nor the servants'. She would believe no assurance of it founded on reason or reality, till Morland produced his watch and ascertained the fact. To have doubted a moment longer then would have been equally inconceivable, incredible, and impossible, and she could only protest over and over again that no 2 hours and a half had ever gone off so swiftly before, as Catherine was called on to confirm. Catherine could not tell a falsehood even to please Isabella, but the latter was spared the misery of her friend's dissenting voice by not waiting for her answer. Her own feelings entirely engrossed her. Her wretchedness was most acute on finding herself obliged to go directly home. It was ages since she had had a moment's conversation with her dearest Catherine, and though she had such thousands of things to say to her, it appeared as if they were never to be together again. So, with smiles of most exquisite misery and the laughing eye of utter despondency, she bade her friend adieu and went on. Catherine found Mrs. Allen just returned from all the busy idleness of the morning, and was immediately greeted with, "Well, my dear, here you are," a truth which she had no greater inclination than power to dispute, "and I hope you have had a pleasant airing." "Yes, ma'am, I thank you, we could not have had a nicer day." So Mrs. Thorpe said, she was vastly pleased at your all going. "You have seen Mrs. Thorpe then?" "Yes, I went to the pump room as soon as you were gone, and there I met her, and we had a great deal of talk together. She says there was hardly any veal to be got at market this morning, it is so uncommonly scarce." "Did you see anybody else of our acquaintance?" Yes, we agreed to take a turn in the Crescent, and there we met Mrs. Hughes, and Mr. and Miss Tilney walking with her. Did you indeed, and did they speak to you? Yes, we walked along the Crescent together for half an hour. They seem very agreeable people. Miss Tilney was in a very pretty spotted muslin, and I fancy, by what I can learn, that she always dresses very handsomely. Mrs. Hughes talked to me a great deal about the family. And what did she tell you of them? Oh, a vast deal indeed. She hardly talked of anything else. Did she tell you what part of Gloucestershire they come from? Yes, she did, but I cannot recollect now. But they are very good kind of people and very rich. Mrs. Tilney was a Miss Drummond, and she and Mrs. Hughes were schoolfellows, and Miss Drummond had a very large fortune, and when she married her father gave her £20,000 and 500 to buy wedding clothes. Mrs. Hughes saw all the clothes after they came from the warehouse. And are Mr. and Mrs. Tilney in Bath? Yes, I fancy they are, but I am not quite certain. Upon recollection, however, I have a notion they are both dead. At least the mother is. Yes, I am sure Mrs. Tilney is dead, because Mrs. Hughes told me there was a very beautiful set of pearls that Mr. Drummond gave his daughter on her wedding day, and that Miss Tilney has got now, for they were put by for her when her mother died. And is Mr. Tilney, my partner, the only son? I cannot be quite positive about that, my dear. I have some idea he is. But however, he is a very fine young man, Mrs. Hughes says, and likely to do very well. Catherine inquired no further. She had heard enough to feel that Mrs. Allen had no real intelligence to give, and that she was most particularly unfortunate herself in having missed such a meeting with both brother and sister. Could she have foreseen such a circumstance, nothing should have persuaded her to go out with the others. And as it was, she could only lament her ill luck, and think over what she had lost, till it was clear to her that the drive had by no means been very pleasant, and that John Thorpe himself was quite disagreeable. Chapter 10. The Allens, Thorpes and Morlands all met in the evening at the theatre, and as Catherine and Isabella sat together, there was then an opportunity for the latter to utter some few of the many thousand things which had been collecting within her for communication in the immeasurable length of time which had divided them. "Oh heavens, my beloved Catherine, have I got you at last?" was her address on Catherine's entering the box and sitting by her. "Now, Mr. Morland," for he was close to her on the other side, "I shall not speak another word to you all the rest of the evening, so I charge you not to expect it. My sweetest Catherine, how have you been this long age? But I need not ask you, for you look delightfully. You really have done your hair in a more heavenly style than ever. You mischievous creature, do you want to attract everybody? I assure you my brother is quite in love with you already, and as for Mr. Tilney, but that is a settled thing. Even your modesty cannot doubt his attachment now. His coming back to Bath makes it too plain. Oh, what would not I give to see him? I really am quite wild with impatience. My mother says he is the most delightful young man in the world. She saw him this morning, you know. You must introduce him to me. Is he in the house now? Look about, for heaven's sake. I assure you I can hardly exist till I see him." "No," said Catherine, "he is not here. I cannot see him anywhere." "Oh, horrid, am I never to be acquainted with him? How do you like my gown? I think it does not look amiss. The sleeves were entirely my own thought. Do you know I get so immoderately sick of Bath? Your brother and I were agreeing this morning that, though it is vastly well to be here for a few weeks, we would not live here for millions. We soon found out that our tastes were exactly alike in preferring the country to every other place. Really, our opinions were so exactly the same, it was quite ridiculous. There was not a single point in which we differed. I would not have had you by for the world. You are such a sly thing, I am sure you would have made some droll remark or other about it." "No, indeed I should not." "Oh, yes, you would indeed. I know you better than you know yourself. You would have told us that we seemed born for each other, or some nonsense of that kind, which would have distressed me beyond conception. My cheeks would have been as red as your roses. I would not have had you by for the world." "Indeed you do me injustice. I would not have made so improper a remark upon any account, and besides I am sure it would never have entered my head." Isabella smiled incredulously, and talked the rest of the evening to James. Catherine's resolution of endeavouring to meet Miss Tilney again continued in full force the next morning. Until the usual moment of going to the pump-room, she felt some alarm from the dread of a second prevention. But nothing of that kind occurred, no visitors appeared to delay them, and they all three set off in good time for the pump-room, where the ordinary course of events and conversation took place. Mr. Allen, after drinking his glass of water, joined some gentlemen to talk over the politics of the day and compare the accounts of their newspapers, and the ladies walked about together, noticing every new face and almost every new bonnet in the room. The female part of the Thorpe family, attended by James Morland, appeared among the crowd in less than a quarter of an hour, and Catherine immediately took her usual place by the side of her friend. James, who was now in constant attendance, maintained a similar position, and separating themselves from the rest of their party, they walked in that manner for some time, till Catherine began to doubt the happiness of a situation which, confining her entirely to her friend and brother, gave her very little share in the notice of either. They were always engaged in some sentimental discussion or lively dispute, but their sentiment was conveyed in such whispering voices, and their vivacity attended with so much laughter, that though Catherine's supporting opinion was not unfrequently called for by one or the other, she was never able to give any, from not having heard a word of the subject. At length, however, she was empowered to disengage herself from her friend, by the avowed necessity of speaking to Miss Tilney, whom she most joyfully saw just entering the room with Mrs. Hughes, and whom she instantly joined, with a firmer determination to be acquainted than she might have had courage to command, had she not been urged by the disappointment of the day before. Miss Tilney met her with great civility, returned her advances with equal goodwill, and they continued talking together as long as both parties remained in the room, and though in all probability not an observation was made, nor an expression used by either which had not been made and used some thousands of times before, under that roof in every Bath season, yet the merit of their being spoken with simplicity and truth, and without personal conceit, might be something uncommon. "How well your brother dances," was an artless exclamation of Catherine's towards the close of their conversation, which at once surprised and amused her companion. "Henry," she replied with a smile, "yes, he does dance very well. He must have thought it very odd to hear me say I was engaged the other evening when he saw me sitting down, but I really had been engaged the whole day to Mr. Thorpe." Miss Tilney could only bow. "You cannot think," added Catherine after a moment's silence, "how surprised I was to see him again. I felt so sure of his being quite gone away. When Henry had the pleasure of seeing you before, he was in Bath but for a couple of days. He came only to engage lodgings for us. That never occurred to me, and of course not seeing him anywhere I thought he must be gone. Was not the young lady he danced with on Monday a Miss Smith?" "Yes, an acquaintance of Mrs. Hughes." "I dare say she was very glad to dance. Do you think her pretty?" "Not very." "He never comes to the pump room, I suppose?" "Yes, sometimes, but he has rid out this morning with my father." Mrs. Hughes now joined them, and asked Miss Tilney if she was ready to go. "I hope I shall have the pleasure of seeing you again soon," said Catherine. "Shall you be at the cotillion ball tomorrow?" "Perhaps yes, I think we certainly shall." "I am glad of it, for we shall all be there." This civility was duly returned, and they parted, on Miss Tilney's side with some knowledge of her new acquaintance's feelings, and on Catherine's without the smallest consciousness of having explained them. She went home very happy. The morning had answered all her hopes, and the evening of the following day was now the object of expectation, the future good. What gown and what head-dress she should wear on the occasion became her chief concern. She cannot be justified in it. Dress is at all times a frivolous distinction, and excessive solicitude about it often destroys its own aim. Catherine knew all this very well. Her great-aunt had read her a lecture on the subject only the Christmas before, and yet she lay awake 10 minutes on Wednesday night debating between her spotted and her tamboured muslin, and nothing but the shortness of the time prevented her buying a new one for the evening. This would have been an error in judgment, great though not uncommon, from which one of the other sex rather than her own, a brother rather than a great-aunt, might have warned her. For man only can be aware of the insensibility of man towards a new gown. It would be mortifying to the feelings of many ladies, could they be made to understand how little the heart of man is affected by what is costly or new in their attire, how little it is biased by the texture of their muslin, and how unsusceptible of peculiar tenderness towards the spotted, the sprigged, the mull, or the jaconet. Woman is fine for her own satisfaction alone. No man will admire her the more, no woman will like her the better for it. Neatness and fashion are enough for the former, and a something of shabbiness or impropriety will be most endearing to the latter. But not one of these grave reflections troubled the tranquillity of Catherine. She entered the rooms on Thursday evening with feelings very different from what had attended her thither the Monday before. She had then been exulting in her engagement to Thorpe, and was now chiefly anxious to avoid his sight, lest he should engage her again. For though she could not, dared not expect that Mr. Tilney should ask her a third time to dance, her wishes, hopes, and plans all centred in nothing less. Every young lady may feel for my heroine in this critical moment, for every young lady has at some time or other known the same agitation. All have been, or at least all have believed themselves to be, in danger from the pursuit of someone whom they wished to avoid, and all have been anxious for the attentions of someone whom they wished to please. As soon as they were joined by the Thorpes, Catherine's agony began. She fidgeted about if John Thorpe came towards her, hid herself as much as possible from his view, and when he spoke to her pretended not to hear him. The cotillions were over, the country dancing beginning, and she saw nothing of the Tilneys. "Do not be frightened, my dear Catherine," whispered Isabella, "but I am really going to dance with your brother again. I declare positively it is quite shocking. I tell him he ought to be ashamed of himself, but you and John must keep us in countenance. Make haste, my dear creature, and come to us. John is just walked off, but he will be back in a moment." Catherine had neither time nor inclination to answer. The others walked away. John Thorpe was still in view, and she gave herself up for lost. That she might not appear, however, to observe or expect him, she kept her eyes intently fixed on her fan, and a self-condemnation for her folly, in supposing that among such a crowd they should even meet with the Tilneys in any reasonable time, had just passed through her mind, when she suddenly found herself addressed and again solicited to dance, by Mr. Tilney himself. With what sparkling eyes and ready motion she granted his request, and with how pleasing a flutter of heart she went with him to the set, may be easily imagined. To escape, and as she believed, so narrowly escape John Thorpe, and to be asked, so immediately on his joining her, asked by Mr. Tilney as if he had sought her on purpose, it did not appear to her that life could supply any greater felicity. Scarcely had they worked themselves into the quiet possession of a place, however, when her attention was claimed by John Thorpe, who stood behind her. "Heyday, Miss Morland," said he, "what is the meaning of this? I thought you and I were to dance together." "I wonder you should think so, for you never asked me." "That is a good one, by Jove. I asked you as soon as I came into the room, and I was just going to ask you again, but when I turned round you were gone. This is a cursed shabby trick. I only came for the sake of dancing with you, and I firmly believe you were engaged to me ever since Monday. Yes, I remember, I asked you while you were waiting in the lobby for your cloak. And here have I been telling all my acquaintance that I was going to dance with the prettiest girl in the room, and when they see you standing up with somebody else, they will quiz me famously. Oh no, they will never think of me, after such a description as that. By heavens, if they do not, I will kick them out of the room for blockheads. What chap have you there?" Catherine satisfied his curiosity. "Tilney," he repeated. I do not know him. A good figure of a man, well put together. Does he want a horse? Here is a friend of mine, Sam Fletcher, has got one to sell that would suit anybody. A famous clever animal for the road, only 40 guineas. I had 50 minds to buy it myself, for it is one of my maxims always to buy a good horse when I meet with one, but it would not answer my purpose, it would not do for the field. I would give any money for a real good hunter. I have 3 now, the best that ever were backed. I would not take 800 guineas for them. Fletcher and I mean to get a house in Leicestershire against the next season. It is so uncomfortable living at an inn." This was the last sentence by which he could weary Catherine's attention, for he was just then borne off by the resistless pressure of a long string of passing ladies. Her partner now drew near and said, "That gentleman would have put me out of patience, had he stayed with you half a minute longer. He has no business to withdraw the attention of my partner from me. We have entered into a contract of mutual agreeableness for the space of an evening, and all our agreeableness belongs solely to each other for that time. Nobody can fasten themselves on the notice of one, without injuring the rights of the other. I consider a country dance as an emblem of marriage. Fidelity and complaisance are the principal duties of both, and those men who do not choose to dance or marry themselves, have no business with the partners or wives of their neighbours. But they are such very different things, that you think they cannot be compared together. To be sure not. People that marry can never part, but must go and keep house together. People that dance only stand opposite each other in a long room for half an hour. And such is your definition of matrimony and dancing. Taken in that light, certainly, their resemblance is not striking, but I think I could place them in such a view. You will allow that in both man has the advantage of choice, woman only the power of refusal, that in both it is an engagement between man and woman, formed for the advantage of each, and that when once entered into, they belong exclusively to each other till the moment of its dissolution, that it is their duty, each to endeavour to give the other no cause for wishing that he or she had bestowed themselves elsewhere, and their best interest to keep their own imaginations from wandering towards the perfections of their neighbours, or fancying that they should have been better off with anyone else. You will allow all this. Yes, to be sure, as you state it, all this sounds very well, but still they are so very different. I cannot look upon them at all in the same light, nor think the same duties belong to them. In one respect there certainly is a difference. In marriage the man is supposed to provide for the support of the woman to make the home agreeable to the man, he is to purvey and she is to smile. But in dancing their duties are exactly changed. The agreeableness, the compliance are expected from him, while she furnishes the fan and the lavender water. That, I suppose, was the difference of duties which struck you, as rendering the conditions incapable of comparison. No, indeed, I never thought of that. Then I am quite at a loss. One thing, however, I must observe. This disposition on your side is rather alarming. You totally disallow any similarity in the obligations, and may I not thence infer that your notions of the duties of the dancing state are not so strict as your partner might wish? Have I not reason to fear that if the gentleman who spoke to you just now were to return, or if any other gentleman were to address you, there would be nothing to restrain you from conversing with him as long as you chose? Mr. Thorpe is such a very particular friend of my brother's, that if he talks to me, I must talk to him again, but there are hardly 3 young men in the room besides him that I have any acquaintance with. And is that to be my only security? Alas, alas! Nay, I am sure you cannot have a better, for if I do not know anybody, it is impossible for me to talk to them, and besides, I do not want to talk to anybody. Now you have given me a security worth having, and I shall proceed with courage. Do you find Bath as agreeable as when I had the honour of making the inquiry before? Yes, quite more so indeed. More so, take care, or you will forget to be tired of it at the proper time. You ought to be tired at the end of 6 weeks. I do not think I should be tired if I were to stay here 6 months. Bath, compared with London, has little variety, and so everybody finds out every year. For 6 weeks I allow Bath is pleasant enough, but beyond that it is the most tiresome place in the world. You would be told so by people of all descriptions, who come regularly every winter, lengthen their 6 weeks into 10 or 12, and go away at last because they can afford to stay no longer. Well, other people must judge for themselves, and those who go to London may think nothing of Bath. But I, who live in a small retired village in the country, can never find greater sameness in such a place as this than in my own home. For here are a variety of amusements, a variety of things to be seen and done all day long, which I can know nothing of there. You are not fond of the country? Yes, I am. I have always lived there and always been very happy, but certainly there is much more sameness in a country life than in a Bath life. One day in the country is exactly like another. But then you spend your time so much more rationally in the country. Do you not? I do not believe there is much difference. Here you are in pursuit only of amusement all day long. And so I am at home, only I do not find so much of it. I walk about here and so I do there, but here I see a variety of people in every street, and there I can only go and call on Mrs. Allen. Mr. Tilney was very much amused. Only go and call on Mrs. Allen, he repeated. What a picture of intellectual poverty! However, when you sink into this abyss again, you will have more to say. You will be able to talk of Bath and of all that you did here. Oh, yes, I shall never be in want of something to talk of again to Mrs. Allen or anybody else. I really believe I shall always be talking of Bath when I am at home again. I do like it so very much. If I could but have Papa and Mamma, and the rest of them here, I suppose I should be too happy. James is coming, my eldest brother, is quite delightful, and especially as it turns out that the very family we are just got so intimate with are his intimate friends already. Oh, who can ever be tired of Bath? Not those who bring such fresh feelings of every sort to it as you do. But papas and mammas and brothers and intimate friends are a good deal gone by, to most of the frequenters of Bath, and the honest relish of balls and plays, and everyday sights is past with them. Here their conversation closed, the demands of the dance becoming now too importunate for a divided attention. Soon after their reaching the bottom of the set, Catherine perceived herself to be earnestly regarded by a gentleman who stood among the lookers-on, immediately behind her partner. He was a very handsome man of a commanding aspect past the bloom, but not past the vigour of life, and with his eye still directed towards her, She saw him presently address Mr. Tilney in a familiar whisper. Confused by his notice and blushing from the fear of its being excited by something wrong in her appearance, she turned away her head. But while she did so, the gentleman retreated, and her partner, coming nearer, said, "I see that you guess what I have just been asked. That gentleman knows your name, and you have a right to know his. It is General Tilney, my father." Catherine's answer was only "Oh," but it was an "Oh," expressing everything needful, attention to his words and perfect reliance on their truth. With real interest and strong admiration did her eye now follow the general as he moved through the crowd, and "How handsome a family they are," was her secret remark. In chatting with Miss Tilney before the evening concluded, a new source of felicity arose to her. She had never taken a country walk since her arrival in Bath. Miss Tilney, to whom all the commonly frequented environs were familiar, spoke of them in terms which made her all eagerness to know them too, and on her openly fearing that she might find nobody to go with her, it was proposed by the brother and sister that they should join in a walk some morning or other. "I shall like it," she cried, "beyond anything in the world, and do not let us put it off, let us go tomorrow." This was readily agreed to, with only a proviso of Miss Tilney's, that it did not rain, which Catherine was sure it would not. At 12 o'clock they were to call for her in Pulteney Street, and "remember 12 o'clock" was her parting speech to her new friend. Of her other, her older, her more established friend Isabella, of whose fidelity and worth she had enjoyed a fortnight's experience, she scarcely saw anything during the evening. Yet, though longing to make her acquainted with her happiness, she cheerfully submitted to the wish of Mr. Allen, which took them rather early away, and her spirits danced within her, as she danced in her chair all the way home. Chapter 11. The morrow brought a very sober-looking morning, the sun making only a few efforts to appear, and Catherine augured from it everything most favourable to her wishes. A bright morning so early in the year, she allowed, would generally turn to rain, but a cloudy one foretold improvement as the day advanced. She applied to Mr. Allen for confirmation of her hopes, but Mr. Allen, not having his own skies and barometer about him, declined giving any absolute promise of sunshine. She applied to Mrs. Allen, and Mrs. Allen's opinion was more positive. She had no doubt in the world of its being a very fine day, if the clouds would only go off and the sun keep out. At about 11 o'clock, however, a few specks of small rain upon the windows caught Catherine's watchful eye, and "Oh, dear, I do believe it will be wet," broke from her in a most desponding tone. "I thought how it would be," said Mrs. Allen. "No walk for me today," sighed Catherine, "but perhaps it may come to nothing, or it may hold up before 12. "Perhaps it may, but then, my dear, it will be so dirty." "Oh, that will not signify, I never mind dirt." "No," replied her friend very placidly, "I know you never mind dirt." After a short pause, "It comes on faster and faster," said Catherine as she stood watching at a window. "So it does indeed. If it keeps raining, the streets will be very wet." "There are 4 umbrellas up already. How I hate the sight of an umbrella. They are disagreeable things to carry. I would much rather take a chair at any time. It was such a nice-looking morning. I felt so convinced it would be dry." "Anybody would have thought so indeed. There will be very few people in the pump-room if it rains all the morning. I hope Mr. Allen will put on his greatcoat when he goes, but I dare say he will not, for he had rather do anything in the world than walk out in a greatcoat. I wonder he should dislike it, it must be so comfortable." The rain continued, fast though not heavy. Catherine went every 5 minutes to the clock, threatening on each return that, if it still kept on raining another 5 minutes, she would give up the matter as hopeless. The clock struck 12 and it still rained. "You will not be able to go, my dear." "I do not quite despair yet. I shall not give it up till 12:15. This is just the time of day for it to clear up, and I do think it looks a little lighter. There, it is 20 minutes after 12, and now I shall give it up entirely. Oh, that we had such weather here as they had at Udolpho, or at least in Tuscany and the south of France. The night that poor St. Aubin died, such beautiful weather." At 12:30, when Catherine's anxious attention to the weather was over, and she could no longer claim any merit from its amendment, the sky began voluntarily to clear. A gleam of sunshine took her quite by surprise. She looked round, the clouds were parting, and she instantly returned to the window to watch over and encourage the happy appearance. 10 minutes more made it certain that a bright afternoon would succeed, and justified the opinion of Mrs. Allen, who had always thought it would clear up. But whether Catherine might still expect her friends, whether there had not been too much rain for Miss Tilney to venture, must yet be a question. It was too dirty for Mrs. Allen to accompany her husband to the pump room. He accordingly set off by himself, and Catherine had barely watched him down the street when her notice was claimed by the approach of the same 2 open carriages, containing the same 3 people that had surprised her so much a few mornings back. Isabella, my brother, and Mr. Thorpe, I declare, they are coming for me perhaps, but I shall not go, I cannot go indeed, for you know Miss Tilney may still call. Mrs. Allen agreed to it. John Thorpe was soon with them, and his voice was with them yet sooner, for on the stairs he was calling out to Miss Morland to be quick. Make haste, as he threw open the door. Put on your hat this moment, there is no time to be lost, we are going to Bristol. How d'ye do, Mrs. Allen? To Bristol, is not that a great way off? But however, I cannot go with you today because I am engaged. I expect some friends every moment. This was of course vehemently talked down as no reason at all. Mrs. Allen was called on to second him, and the 2 others walked in to give their assistance. My sweetest Catherine, is not this delightful? We shall have a most heavenly drive. You are to thank your brother and me for the scheme. It darted into our heads at breakfast time, I verily believe at the same instant. And we should have been off 2 hours ago if it had not been for this detestable rain, but it does not signify, the nights are moonlight, and we shall do delightfully. Oh, I am in such ecstasies at the thoughts of a little country air and quiet, so much better than going to the lower rooms. We shall drive directly to Clifton and dine there, and as soon as dinner is over, if there is time for it, go on to Kingsweston. I doubt our being able to do so much, said Morland. You croaking fellow, cried Thorpe. We shall be able to do 10 times more. Kingsweston, aye, and Blaise Castle too, and anything else we can hear of, but here is your sister says she will not go. Blaise Castle, cried Catherine, what is that? The finest place in England, worth going 50 miles at any time to see. What, is it really a castle, an old castle? The oldest in the kingdom. But is it like what one reads of? Exactly the very same. But now really, are there towers and long galleries? By dozens. Then I should like to see it, but I cannot go. Not go, my beloved creature, what do you mean? I cannot go because, looking down as she spoke, fearful of Isabella's smile, I expect Miss Tilney and her brother to call on me to take a country walk. They promised to come at 12, only it rained, but now, as it is so fine, I dare say they will be here soon. Not they indeed, cried Thorpe, for as we turned into Broad Street I saw them. Does he not drive a phaeton with bright chestnuts? I do not know indeed. Yes, I know he does, I saw him. You are talking of the man you danced with last night, are not you? Yes. Well, I saw him at that moment turn up the Lansdowne Road, driving a smart-looking girl. Did you indeed? Did, upon my soul, knew him again directly, and he seemed to have got some very pretty cattle too. It is very odd, but I suppose they thought it would be too dirty for a walk. And well they might, for I never saw so much dirt in my life. Walk, you could no more walk than you could fly. It has not been so dirty the whole winter, it is ankle-deep everywhere. Isabella corroborated it. My dearest Catherine, you cannot form an idea of the dirt. Come, you must go, you cannot refuse going now. I should like to see the castle, but may we go all over it? May we go up every staircase and into every suite of rooms? Yes, every hole and corner. But then, if they should only be gone out for an hour till it is drier, and call by and by. Make yourself easy, there is no danger of that, for I heard Tilney hallooing to a man who was just passing by on horseback, that they were going as far as Wick Rocks. Then I will, shall I go, Mrs. Allen? Just as you please, my dear. Mrs. Allen, you must persuade her to go, was the general cry. Mrs. Allen was not inattentive to it. Well, my dear, said she, suppose you go, and in 2 minutes they were off. Catherine's feelings as she got into the carriage were in a very unsettled state, divided between regret for the loss of one great pleasure, and the hope of soon enjoying another, almost its equal in degree, however unlike in kind. She could not think the Tilneys had acted quite well by her, in so readily giving up their engagement, without sending her any message of excuse. It was now but an hour later than the time fixed on for the beginning of their walk, and in spite of what she had heard of the prodigious accumulation of dirt in the course of that hour, she could not from her own observation help thinking that they might have gone with very little inconvenience. To feel herself slighted by them was very painful. On the other hand, the delight of exploring an edifice like Udolpho, as her fancy represented Blaise Castle to be, was such a counterpoise of good as might console her for almost anything. They passed briskly down Pulteney Street, and through Laura Place without the exchange of many words. Thorpe talked to his horse, and she meditated by turns on broken promises and broken arches, phaetons and false hangings, tilneys and trapdoors. As they entered Argyle Buildings, however, she was roused by this address from her companion. "Who is that girl who looked at you so hard as she went by?" Where? On the right-hand pavement. She must be almost out of sight now. Catherine looked round and saw Miss Tilney leaning on her brother's arm, walking slowly down the street. She saw them both looking back at her. "Stop, stop, Mr. Thorpe," she impatiently cried. "It is Miss Tilney, it is indeed. How could you tell me they were gone? Stop, stop, I will get out this moment and go to them." But to what purpose did she speak? Thorpe only lashed his horse into a brisker trot. The Tilneys, who had soon ceased to look after her, were in a moment out of sight round the corner of Laura Place, and in another moment she was herself whisked into the marketplace. Still, however, and during the length of another street, she entreated him to stop. Pray stop, Mr. Thorpe, I cannot go on, I will not go on, I must go back to Miss Tilney." But Mr. Thorpe only laughed, smacked his whip, encouraged his horse, made odd noises and drove on, and Catherine, angry and vexed as she was, having no power of getting away, was obliged to give up the point and submit. Her reproaches, however, were not spared. "How could you deceive me so, Mr. Thorpe? How could you say that you saw them driving up the Lansdowne Road? I would not have had it happen so for the world. They must think it so strange, so rude of me. To go by them too, without saying a word. You do not know how vexed I am. I shall have no pleasure at Clifton, nor in anything else. I had rather, 10,000 times rather, get out now and walk back to them. How could you say you saw them driving out in a phaeton?" Thorpe defended himself very stoutly, declared he had never seen two men so much alike in his life, and would hardly give up the point of its having been Tilney himself. Their drive, even when this subject was over, was not likely to be very agreeable. Catherine's complaisance was no longer what it had been in their former airing. She listened reluctantly, and her replies were short. Blaise Castle remained her only comfort. Towards that she still looked at intervals with pleasure, though rather than be disappointed of the promised walk, and especially rather than be thought ill of by the Tilneys, she would willingly have given up all the happiness which its walls could supply, the happiness of a progress through a long suite of lofty rooms, exhibiting the remains of magnificent furniture, though now for many years deserted, the happiness of being stopped in their way along narrow, winding vaults by a low, grated door, or even of having their lamp, their only lamp, extinguished by a sudden gust of wind, and of being left in total darkness. In the meanwhile they proceeded on their journey without any mischance, and were within view of the town of Keynsham, when a halloo from Morland, who was behind them, made his friend pull up, to know what was the matter. The others then came close enough for conversation, and Morland said, "We had better go back, Thorpe. It is too late to go on today. Your sister thinks so as well as I. We have been exactly an hour coming from Pulteney Street, very little more than 7 miles, and I suppose we have at least 8 more to go. It will never do. We set out a great deal too late. We had much better put it off till another day and turn round." "It is all one to me," replied Thorpe rather angrily, and instantly turning his horse they were on their way back to Bath. "If your brother had not got such a beast to drive," said he soon afterwards, "we might have done it very well. My horse would have trotted to Clifton within the hour if left to himself, and I have almost broke my arm with pulling him into that cursed broken-winded jade's pace. Morland is a fool for not keeping a horse and gig of his own." "No, he is not," said Catherine warmly, "for I am sure he could not afford it." "And why cannot he afford it?" "Because he has not money enough." "And whose fault is that?" "Nobody's that I know of." Thorpe then said something in the loud, incoherent way to which he had often recourse, about its being a thing to be miserly, and that if people who rolled in money could not afford things, he did not know who could, which Catherine did not even endeavour to understand. Disappointed of what was to have been the consolation for her first disappointment, she was less and less disposed either to be agreeable herself or to find her companion so, and they returned to Pulteney Street without her speaking 20 words.